Imagine you're on the Q train in Brooklyn and the AC cuts out. You check your phone for the weather, 95 degrees. There's no way that's right. It's way hotter in here. And I'm kind of feeling dizzy. Welcome to a sauna in the subway, a data narrative piece that combines the physical and the digital to create an immersive experience that explores the recurring heat waves hitting New York City, specifically how the gaps in the data are putting vulnerable neighborhoods at even more of a risk for heat stress. So I was specifically interested in heat wave data because in my time before MICA, I was a meteorologist. Most of the issues with poor forecasts are due to lack of data, specifically weather stations. So that really drove me to explore this issue further in New York. The way that my brain works, I learn and understand something really well when I can physically hold it in my hands and turn it around to examine it. I like to use a variety of different media to explore texture, shape, and meaning, especially in fashion on the human form. I submitted this project as a proposal to Data Through Design, an annual data art exhibition in Brooklyn, featuring works that creatively analyze, interpret, and interrogate data made available in New York City's open data portal. So it's really about kind of like this year's theme was the tension between physical and virtual, but as well as contextualizing data and confirming some of those maybe biases or missing data that are occurring, and kind of just bringing the public in and making the data more approachable. So this was my first experience submitting a proposal for an exhibition. It was definitely a learning experience, and definitely big shout out to everybody that helped, Sam, Mitch, and Molly, who also entered into her work into the proposal. So a little bit about my audience, kind of people that are interested in fashion and new technology, younger people that are more willing to be local level activists and get in and help with their community. They're really interested in being grounded in their community and hearing stories from other members of the community, but they also want to be able to share things with the community and access things in person as well as virtually during this, kind of murky time. And then just to talk a little bit more about the issue itself of the kind of misforecasting of the data. So there's this thing called the urban heat island effect, which is pretty big in the weather community. But it's essentially how over just a period of like a few blocks or a few miles, there's going to be extreme temperature variations depending on the conditions, like the greenery and like the asphalt and the reflectivity of the surface. And so I'll talk a little bit more about this, but clearly like there's more heat waves happening over time. This graph is for New York City specifically. So the high is increasing over time, but this graph is a little bit dull for me. So I'm going to switch into my prototype itself. Let me do a new share. And then what I'm also going to do is send a link in the chat. So that way, if you want to, you can click on it and then we'll kind of all show up in the space, and you can interact and explore yourself as well as I go through it. So here we are in the heart of Erasmus, Brooklyn, which is the neighborhood I decided to focus on. It is in the heart of Brooklyn, like directly in the center. It's also known as Little Haiti. So if we go a little bit further down, did I put the link in the chat? Did that turn out okay? Just want to confirm.
Yes, it's there.
Okay, thank you. So as we go deeper into the subway, I'll just say, maybe it's getting a little bit caught up waiting for everyone to enter.
I'm getting a meeting no longer active when I click on the link.
Oh, okay.
Get that too.
Okay. Oops. Well, I can just at least do just we don't have to do the live meeting. I'll share a link that that will work regardless. Sorry about the technical difficulty. Oops. So I won't be able to see your cursor, but that's okay. So I am here in Brooklyn, and then if I move forward, let me just go to this myself. Let me just stop share and then open this again. Okay. Okay, great. So we're here, we're gonna go down into the subway, and then big drum roll, I'm wearing my data. So we're in the subway, it's really hot, and this data kind of reflects that it's hot, but as well as the feeling of the clothes and the narrative reflects that as well. So let me go a little bit deeper into each piece and annotate that further. But this is just a map for people that are unfamiliar to kind of set the standard of explaining that urban heat island and where the two current National Weather Service stations are situated at the airports. Obviously are surrounded by water, so they are a bit cooler, so that may account for some of that cooler reading. But specifically, one of my key findings was about how temperatures above 100 degrees cause the most dramatic spikes to emergency visits. So this is the temperature for the neighborhood that we were just in. So you can hover over these and take a look at what those temperatures are. So the neighborhood had 15 days over 100 degrees on the year I decided to focus on. The data was for 2018 and 2019, but this year was a little bit hotter. And so then where the weather stations that I just showed on that map said that the temperature hasn't hit 100 degrees since 2011. So that's obviously a pretty big difference between both of these. You can compare the 2 days, you know, a lot of times it's more than 10 degrees. And so then overlaying the number of heat stress emergency visits that are seen, you can see they match up really well to those purple areas that are highlighted. So that's kind of what I show on the pants. And then I added in a narrative piece here where a local resident was in the ER for heat exhaustion during this heat wave. And looking at the sleeves more specifically, this is a little color key that will follow as we continue a more in-depth look at what these sleeves actually mean. So each actual string around the sleeve represents 1 day during the heat waves during the summer of 2018. So this is a 24-hour temperature coloring, and then it extends, so it continues into the depth with the weeks as they continue. So if we compare one sleeve, here is Zoom background, one sleeve is New York, and then one sleeve is Erasmus. And even holding them side by side here, you can tell the top one's a lot warmer, and that reflects in the flow as well. And so not only is this one warmer, but specifically at night, Erasmus is much warmer. And so due to sources from medical research say that nighttime temperatures being high is what really causes a lot more of those heat stress visits. So now looking at the vest itself, the material on the bottom is a grid, a city by city block grid of the neighborhood, where the color represents the reflectivity, which is kind of like how much heat is going to be absorbed, which would be the darker squares, or reflected, which would be the lighter squares. And then each circle represents one of the temperature monitors. And so the darker colors indicate warmer temperatures, and the larger circles that indicate larger temperature variation. And those two usually tend to go hand in hand, because with the warmer temperatures, you're going to see more variation. And then just to overlay a little bit more data and kind of allow the user to explore on this step, I put a few different other metrics that have been seen to correlate with higher temperatures, at least on a larger scale. So I wanted to see if I could apply them to this really small city block level. So I looked at greenery, reflectivity, which I found to have probably the highest correlation, which is why I chose it for the garment itself. And then some other socioeconomic factors, seeing if this is particularly hitting people of color more, or like where we need to allocate the resources. And then also looking at population density, how is it more crowding of people that causes these temperatures? And then you can also look at public housing units. And the reason I overlaid this was from an anecdote from WNYC. They said that 50% of public housing units don't have AC. And there's this really bureaucratic process where essentially you have to pay a fee if you want to get air conditioning if you live in public housing, and you have to pay that reoccurring fee in order for the city to not blow up their electrical grid, essentially. And if you try and get an AC unit from somewhere else, they do checks every month, and they will fine you if you try and have an AC. So they're kind of like penalizing people for just trying to stay cool. And so thinking about people that don't have air conditioning, a lot of the city reports say 10%, and they tout that like it's a small number, and it is relatively, but just thinking about the magnitude and how many people that actually represents, because a lot of people do live in New York, so 10% is a good amount of people. So at the last slide, I show some resources for people. If they want to help, they can request a street tree for the neighborhood, or become a steward to plant trees, or if you live in a certain neighborhood, you can decide where the budget gets allocated. And then also a link to share more of different experiences with heat stress that links out to like a Google form. So if I go back to my slides again. Okay. Talking a little bit more about my data and where it came from. A lot of it is NYC open data from their portal, but the temperature sensors here pictured on the top right are much smaller, and I would say maybe a little bit less reliable. And so that's where some of the hyperlocal data came from. And then the weather stations that are at the airports collect a lot more breadth of data about the weather, like humidity and pressure and things like that, that could be vital to understanding how heat stress is affecting these neighborhoods. And then a few different supplemental data sources like street tree, the air conditioning data, and some satellite imagery, which if I go forward, I explain a little bit how my process was in determining this. I essentially did a kind of ad hoc data analysis thing in Photoshop, where I made a grid and took out all the trees, made that transparent, and then I merged the color to make like on a grayscale how dark or light they would be. So it's kind of ad hoc, and I would hope to refine this with more help from data experts. Not that I'm not one, but another thing about this was like, how do I apply these like historically like flat charts to the human form, and how do you interpret time? Does it go from the body outward? Does it go like on the arms, especially since, two sleeves, they go opposite directions. So that was something I was really helpful in my user testing. So to get into a little bit more of some of the mock-ups and why I decided to go with this particularly was, the fashion piece of it really evokes the emotion, the curiosity, and kind of making it about the person makes it feel more human itself and helps to build that empathy bridge. And then overlaying the flow and having that experience where you can add narrative and context was kind of something I wanted to do to help pull those things together and help build a really concrete model of the data. So just looking at a little bit more of my sketches, I tried to be super technical with how I applied my data when I was crocheting, when I was, dyeing yarn. These are some of my more refined illustrations. Tried to use recycled materials at all when possible. And then tried to use a variety of different media, but looking at Brooklyn street fashion as kind of inspiration here. And then a few pictures of my process, because these are always really fun. Getting these to stand up was a challenge, and it was kind of like ironing backwards, like backcombing your hair when I did these. So that was fun. This was a very tedious process, dyeing each one of these individual strands by hand. It was over 250 individually dyed pieces, and it kind of really forced me to get a in-depth hands-on, I really know about these specific days in New York, and I could tell you when they were and what my birthday was like in terms of temperature that day. So that was really fun to kind of get into. And then crocheting, I did learn how to crochet for this project. I knew how to knit in the past, so I had a little bit of a bonus, but and then also using embroidery to make these hotspots. And then the final piece. So I know that it's a little bit hard to see on me here, but hopefully these pictures can do it a little bit of justice. I also did do a 3D model. This is my roommate's cat, TT, on the bottom there. And so I'm just thinking about how I want to put that 3D model into the flow experience, or if I just want to have it project into the space. So thinking about that with a little bit more user testing. So speaking of user testing, these are some of the folks that either gave me really great feedback or helped me somehow along the way. So big shout out to everyone. Thank you so much for helping me get to this point. And then if this were to be in a gallery, this is kind of like what the application would look like. There would maybe be little space heaters set to 110 degrees, which is the color of or the temperature of this hotspot right here. And hopefully it wouldn't be me here, but maybe like a model that's local to the neighborhood or something like that would be nice here. And then so in terms of what else I want to do, 6 weeks is obviously very short. I would love to kind of do some more data analysis for each of the neighborhoods to find insights on a larger scale and maybe create a collection of outfits that kind of debut as a runway show. It would also be great to show the actual temperatures and some of those secondary heat factors, and then maybe look at those the blackout and electric grid data as well as some of those narrative pieces once I get those as well. And then just so everyone is aware, you can, this is kind of what I was talking about when I said put it into your room. You can access this in AR by scanning the QR code here, or with the link in the chat that will work too. There's a little button in the corner that says AR mode, and yeah, so that's kind of would hopefully be there in the exhibit as well, so people could take that home with them and share it. So yeah, thank you, and I would love to take any questions or feedback.
Nice work. Thank you, Sierra. Okay, questions from our jurors?
Sierra, unbelievable. This is great. Everything from the fashion aspect of taking data and turning it into fashion, and mixing in your meteorology experience, and what a unique way to look at. I will definitely look at heat waves a lot differently now going forward, but also bringing in that something that I'm passionate about, that looking at demographics and how different people live, right? Air conditioning, which should probably just be a American standard, right? People have to pay fees just to join the club, which is, well, that's another story. But thank you for bringing this. This is amazing. You hit on so many different elements, brought in so many different technologies and designs to bring this data alive. Thank you very much. Excellent job.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Hi, Sierra. I was wondering if you considered different mediums other than flow immersive to be the, or how did you get to flow immersive to be the backdrop of your experience? Can you talk a bit about that process, about the supplements to your wearable data?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I definitely should have mentioned this in my about me. I do work for Flow, so it's a data viz kind of data storytelling startup company that does, these kinds of things. Data, so that was kind of my like. I obviously kind of fell in love with the company when I was like, I need to work here. And then I need to bring it into everything I do at school. Like all of my cohort members are like, like, okay, like you're going to make a flow. Like I do it very frequently because I'm just like really passionate about it. But yeah, so that's a little bit of why I chose that.
Cool. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, I hadn't heard of it before. So I've got it on my phone and my computer. Really cool project. I knew New York was hotter than it seemed every day. I was like, it's only 80. It feels like a lot hotter. So really cool. Yes to wearing your data. I thought that was really interesting, really pushing the idea of mediums. Here you are wearing it today. Really awesome. I really think it's interesting how you're thinking ahead to how this project evolves and, could be a museum exhibit, how you can continue to get the word out and inspire people to understand, what's happening, these saunas in the subway. I will say, I thought Flow Immersive was really cool. If I had any feedback, I would just want to, if it was like a self-service experience, I'm just using Flow Immersive for the first time. I've heard about this wearable data somewhere else there, kind of coming to this website, alone. I feel like if you could push the connection between your wearable art and the narrative a bit more, to kind of set up, how we're first dropped in a street in Brooklyn, and then we go into the subway and you're there and you're wearing your data, a little bit about like what's happening there, and I think the narrative certainly could walk through your design, your sleeve, relating exactly to that temperature visualization that was just kind of taking the textile and then showing it in a digital form. Very powerful. You already have the tools there. I just think you could have guided the user a little bit more on what's happening and who you are and why you're in the subway, and just a little bit more of a thread between those two parallels would be just something I think the experience could benefit from. But overall, really inspirational. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really great feedback.
Any other questions for Sierra? Comments? Sierra, I was wondering if you could, oh, sorry, go ahead, Tara.
I was going to say, this is really cool, so creative. You mentioned that you spent some time exploring whether for wearable data, whether things should go out away from the body or closer to the body. I was wondering, what are some of the decisions you ended up making?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So originally I had my like time axis going from the waist or like from the top down. So it was going from the waist down on the pants and then from the shoulder down on the sleeves. And it was just a bit confusing, I think, to a lot of people. And also it didn't look super nice design wise. When I flipped it on both sides, it made sense because it was kind of like as you grow, you know what I mean, are going from the bottom up. So it was like more, I don't know. It was definitely user feedback that helped me with that though.
Cool, thank you.
I was wondering if you could share more of your why behind why you chose to make a garment along with your database.
Yeah, I think there's something about being able to, I mean, ideally, like you have somebody put this on, it's really warm, honestly. So like I'm pretty warm in it. So that in and of itself is kind of an experience, but just being able to like touch it and interact with it on a like physical, like human scale. And each thing represents something more concrete. Forgot to mention this earlier actually, but each of these does pull out. So you can like pull on them and then the strings have different lengths that represent the number of people without air conditioning. So like once it's interacted with and it's all, you know, like hanging down, it kind of has this like gross, you know, quality. And I think that that's a lot of that you couldn't really get with something that's just digital, or even if it's just a sculpture, like the fact that it's wearable, you can really immerse yourself in it and people can come up to it and it makes it a little bit more approachable and human.
Great, thank you.